Pollinators this time of year, when they wake up, they're thirsty. So I just have like a shallow basin here, and I'm sure your kids all collect rocks. So this is a great way to get rid of their rocks, but you can just put the rocks in the bottom here, cover them with water, and just leave the rocks slightly above the water so the bee has somewhere to land. These are really easy to start from seed, but a lot of these are what is called a companion plant for other plants. So just like people have friends, plants have friends, and these can keep your bad bugs away. You can tell this one is a golden lemon thyme. It smells like lemon. It's really nice.
It's really nice.
And this is a tricolor sage. So not only can you have this right outside your garden, this is a strawberry plot, and so, you know, they look really pretty, kind of just, you know, coming over the edge there, but they will also keep away your bugs you don't want. Another thing that you might not be aware of that you can do is you can actually start vegetables from scrap. So obviously this is celery. Do you do this sometimes at home?
My husband's been doing that.
Oh, awesome.
We have glasses on our windows. I'm like, honey, what are you doing with these?
Yeah, yeah.
He seems to know what he's doing.
Right, so you can hydroponically grow it with just water. Another one that's really easy to redo is green onions. Carrots won't grow the taproot, but it will grow the top. So I do the green, you can cut the greens and eat the greens, and you can also let it go to seed and flower for the early pollinators. So that's another one I do. And then just, you know, you can save your basil's a very easy one to start from a cutting. And I do a lot of cuttings. So, you know, if you accidentally break something off, we will pot these today, but you can see the root structure. So I just put it in a clear vase or a clear jar, and then just set it in a windowsill. And a lot of these things will root. So there are two schools of how to do gardening differently. And we're going to be looking at the no-dig method today.
No dig.
No dig sounds appealing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
because
it does.
our soil in some places is terrible. It is clay and it is limestone, and if we take a shovel and try to put it on the side of my house, I mean, like you put your shovel in it, it'll literally jar your body because it is so hard over there. So there are two different schools of planting. I don't know which way is the way to go, but we're going to try them. I think we're going to try them in your yard. But the problem with tilling in the traditional way of how we do farming is we are destroying the soil structure. So if in the 1930s there was a dust bowl and we lost the majority of our topsoil during that time and people starved to death, we're probably going to have another one in the next 60 years. If we do not change how we farm, we lose about 4 inches of topsoil a year. It's not sustainable. So the way that you want to think about gardening is don't disturb the soil structure. You're gonna see this bed has been down for 2 weeks and there are no weeds. How does that sound to you guys?
Incredible. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's how you're gonna do it. You pick your area, doesn't matter. Mine is about 4 feet by 10 feet. There was landscape fabric down with wood chip on top. We pushed the mulch back. We put down cardboard boxes. So unfortunately, I have plenty of them. Thank you, Chewy. That I've been saving all winter. And we just literally removed the tape, removed the staples, laid it down. And then I had 2 yards of mushroom compost brought in. Now you're gonna smell it when you get out there. It's basically horse manure and mushrooms. That's all it is. No soil. It cost me $30 a yard, so $60 plus the guys to bring it over and dump it, and then I just took a rake and spread it. It probably took me total 2 hours. It's been down for 2 weeks. No weeds. 0. So what's going to happen is over time that cardboard is going to deteriorate. You can use this method on straight grass. You do not need to remove the grass. You do not need to remove the weeds. You just put down cardboard. And then you're going to put wood chip around that for your pathway. So your cardboard needs to extend beyond the the no dig bed, so that, again, because if you've got grass or weeds, it's going to try to invade, right? Your weeding time should be dramatically reduced. Your vegetables and fruit, according to the data, is going to be significantly larger, and you're going to have to water less. Sound appealing to you?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Can you just review that one more time?
Yeah.
So what's the layer?
Cardboard.
Cardboard first, then the wood chips.
Cardboard, and just mushroom compost.
Oh. Can you just use manure? I mean, does it need?
You can, but it needs to be. It needs to sit. You know what I mean? It needs to have had enough.
Cows.
Perfect.
So
So as long as it's been sitting and composting for a while, fine. So let's talk a little bit about seeds, and let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to grab one thing, talk about when do you start seeds in, when do you start seeds out. So if we're going to do this butterfly pea, for example, there's fantastic instructions right on the package. Yay. Some are better than others, but I will say they do a great job. So I'm just going to read you what it says. It says it sprouts in 14 to 21 days. Its ideal temperature is 65 to 75. What does that mean? It doesn't mean air temperature. It means soil temperature. And that's why I have this, so I can see what the soil temperature is. So if you put this out right now, I can guarantee you, I checked it earlier in the week and it was about 50. So it's too cold for a lot of your summer things like peppers, tomatoes. They can't go in the ground right now. If you put them in the ground right now, they're going to be stunted. They're not going to be happy at all. Plant spacing 6 to 8 inches apart. Frost hardy, no. So if you get a frost and you've put this in, and we do get freak frosts. Last year, our last frost was May 15th, and you don't cover it up, it's gonna die. The minimum full sun hours is 8 to 12 hours. This has got to be in full sun to be happy. So its instructions are scarify and soak seed overnight. What does that mean? Scarify means nick. So a metal file or sandpaper, you're just gonna rub the seed and then soak overnight. So if you see these seeds, so this is what's called a hard coat seed, and what that means is that there's a hard outer coating on this seed, and what you want to do is scarify hard coated seeds. So the recommendations for this one is to scarify or strike is what scarify means, and so you can do that with a pair of scissors. You can do it with a card, like a nail file. You can do it with sandpaper, and then you're going to put it in a little bowl, and then you're just going to soak it overnight. Now you can soak it in pure water, that's completely fine, or you can use tea. So I use my leftover tea because it has tannin in it, and it typically will cause that seed to swell, usually double or triple in size overnight. And then it just gives it the ability to get started. Then you can plant straight away, okay? So this one is not one that we'd want to do just yet, because our last frost date is predicted to be this year by later this month, around the 28th. So we're gonna wait to plant this one. There's a story that I heard years ago by a very famous motivational speaker who has since died, but he talked about when he was a child, and he was, for a short time, he had to go and live with a foster family. His family couldn't afford to take care of him and his brother, so they went and lived with a foster family, and this foster mom had a garden. And he was about 3 or 4 years old at the time, and she told him as they were planting seeds, like, that there's a tomato in there. And he didn't understand what that meant, because it looks like a seed, right? That doesn't look like a pea plant. What is she talking about? So he took her kitchen scissors and went out behind the barn and cut the seed open. And he said it just fell to dust, right? Wayne Dwyer tells that story. And that, all of the memory, all of the instructions of what this is supposed to do is in that little tiny seed, which is really kind of unbelievable. So the recommendation for eggplant, it's a warm weather vegetable. Here in central Pennsylvania, it takes a long time for our ground to warm up. So if you're wanting to start from seed, you want to read the instructions, and it said that you needed to start at 8 to 12 weeks before our last frost. I started 2 seeds here. So we have 2 eggplants. Always, always, always mark what it is, because when you plant it, you'll forget it. My typical fashion of doing this is I like containers you can plant. That is extremely helpful. I'm going to show you some very sophisticated seed starting systems today, but at the moment we're talking about transplants. So you're going to need a container. This one can be planted directly in the ground, which is why I like it. Save your newspaper. So I always like to cover the hole in the plant in the pot, and then you need potting soil. Now, this is seed starting soil. And what we're going to be using is potting soil. Seed starting soil is really light and fluffy and airy and easy for the seed to grow. You can use coconut coir. This is probably peat. Peat is not considered a sustainable substance because it's being over-harvested right now. So this one's got peat, vermiculite, limestone, and a wetting agent, and mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae is fungus, and it is the communication of the plant. So when we till, we're destroying that structure, and you're bringing the weed seed bed up. So that's why those beds are way harder to take care of. So Scott's gonna have a lot of work on his hands. He's gonna have to weed that bed. You can obviously do this multiple ways. This is the way I like to do it. So I use filtered water. I use a seed start. This is potting soil because these seeds have been started in seed starting mix. So this is slightly heavier, but you wanna really wet this soil. Usually what's in that bag is pretty dry. So you just want to add water to it until it's a nice consistency. It doesn't need to be sopping wet, it doesn't need to be sitting in water, but just mix that up really good. This is why I like having a little potting bench, because my husband doesn't like it when I do it in the sink. He's like, oh my gosh, there's so many plants. I'm like, you have no idea what's coming. It's all good. So you can see the root structure in there. See all those roots? So yeah, you can see my newspaper. So these may or may not be very easy to divide, but we're going to try it. Ideally, if you could pinch one and leave the stronger one, but this is coming apart pretty good. Okay, so we're just going to put a little bit of soil in the bottom of that, and then you're just going to add that. So you want the plant to kind of sit at the same level, you know what I mean, as the soil. You don't want it too deep. Tomatoes, that's not true. We want to plant tomatoes to like just the top leaves are sticking out. But because you want a strong root structure because they grow pretty tall. But for most plants, we're going to just plant it to the same level that it was previously. Now this soil is really wet, so I don't need to water this again, but if you skip that step and you use dry soil, the other way to water this plant is to fill a dish with water, and then you can just let it sit in the water, and that's what's again beautiful about these pots is it's going to suck the water up through the material. Okay, so just get him in there, and that's it. I mean, it's really that simple. I'm not trying to make light of it. It's really not very difficult.
So did you say you were going to put water in the bottom in that dish?
If your soil's dry.
If the soil's dry.
Yeah. So seedlings do not like to dry out. That's pretty much you've guaranteed their death. So.
How often do you have to water these?
So.
This is my
Great question. It's a great question. I mean, you'll feel it. I mean, feel that. That's pretty heavy. Right? So you can tell it's nice and wet. If it's feeling lightweight, it needs water. Yeah. So and I'm going to show you my setup over there so that you can see how I do it. I do recommend if you're starting seeds inside to have a grow light. They're expensive. That setup is about $50+ with the little, I'll show it to you exactly so you can see what it is. But I mean, these grow lights can be hundreds of dollars. It's pretty crazy. And I've got to buy a bunch more, so I'm getting ready to spend some more money. But, you know, it's the best way to obviously, you know, grow light or buy the plants, right? I mean, it just depends on what you're trying to do. If you're doing a big garden, it probably makes sense to have them because you can reuse a lot of this stuff.
Heather, do you have a website that you really like to purchase gardening supplies?
So I use several, so I will give you a list of my vendors that I use, that I prefer. You know, and then we have some local groups here too that are good. But yes, there are some fantastic vendors that I'll share with you today that where I get my stuff. And I like to buy stuff that might be a little bit more expensive than something you would get at Home Depot, but I try to buy American when I can, and I try to buy something that's durable and I'm gonna be able to use. I mean, most of these tools I've had my whole life, you know, so once you buy them, it's done, you know, so that's okay. Do you need expensive containers? No. One of my friends gave me this. She's saving the milk cartons from her grandchild's school, and she's planting in the milk cartons. So it's not like you got to go out and spend a bunch of money. You could do yogurt containers. It's just that your container needs to have holes. It's got to be able to drain. So, you know, if you want to save containers, I'm all for it, and I start stuff in little containers sometimes. It's just that it's easier if they're kind of, you know, you're graduating everything up to the same size because you're going to be putting them in trays and moving them around. So, any questions? It's easy. Okay.
But then when you were planting it, you put it in the one that you can put in the ground.
Yep. So this one can go straight in the ground. But yeah.
Not the milk container.
Yeah, I wouldn't probably plant this because it's slick and it's got wax on it. Peat pots like these guys, which you're going to actually be going home with your own set of these. I mean, this is pretty freaking awesome. You just pop that straight in the ground. But make sure that your soil is at the same level. Don't let it stick up because it then will wick the moisture up and it'll die. So just make sure that you're at or below. This is a tomato, so at or below the soil level. So, yep. So do we need to get super fancy to start seeds? The answer is no. I mean, I started with Jiffy seed starting kits for many, many years, and I grew them on my windowsill, and life was good. But the problem is if you don't have a south-facing window that gets a lot of light, your seedlings are going to get super leggy, which is why it's nice to have a light. Now, this was one that I started. This whole thing is Larkspur Giant Imperial Mix, and it's been in my refrigerator for 2 weeks. So if you see that it needs cold stratification, what that means is we need to trick these seeds into thinking that it's been winter. So I put an alert in my phone, and I planted these 2 weeks ago. It went off today to remind me to take it out. It's extremely cold from being in the refrigerator, which is fine. So we're just gonna now start to warm it up, and we're gonna make it think it's spring. And the way we're gonna do that is with what's called a Seedling Heat Map. These are not very expensive. You probably can get them for $20 to $30 or so. They are warm, they're not hot, but seedlings at first need warmth. They don't need light. So a cabinet even that can protect them and that give them a little bit of warmth is fine if you can remember that you stuck them in the cabinet. So these are great. This is literally like a $3.50 investment. Some people would argue with you that these peat pots are not good because environmentally they're not very smart because we're running out of peat. But I wanted to show you that you don't have to go fancy dancy with this. You guys are going to be getting a much nicer seed starting system than this one. But I wanted to just show you that this is inexpensive if this is the way you want to go. These are some different ones that I have used. This comes with a tray, a lid, and again, it required heat first, so we started it on the seed mat here. These are all different flower seeds, and you can see how tiny some of these actually are. So again, they're going to lean towards the light, so you need to be aware of that and twist your tray, or you're going to need more light systems to be able to accommodate that. At this point, you know, since the majority of them are up, we could just set them here in the sunlight. And as soon as the air temperature is consistently above 50, most of these flowers can probably go out. However, we're not there yet. So as we drop below 50 degrees, these seedlings can't take those fluctuations. They can't take fluctuations of heat either. So once your seedlings are ready to go out, as some of these will be very, very soon, you want to do a process called hardening off. So what that means is that you're going to keep them inside and bring them out during the day, again, a day above 50 degrees, put them in the shade for 30 minutes to an hour, bring them back in. The next day, you're going to extend that time until finally, after a week, they can sit in the sun where they're going to go. That is just basically acclimating them to the temperature change. But it's an extremely important step, because if you were to plant these straight in the garden right now, they're going to just probably croak, because they just can't handle the fact that they've literally been babied for weeks on end in a climate control, and now I'm going to like stick them out in the wild. So just put them in an area that, you know, a critter can't get them. You mentioned you have deer, so you want to put it someplace that they can't come and snack on them, because these are quite delicious when they're little, apparently. So I've got tomatoes here, I've got squash here, cucumbers that are coming up, peppers and so forth, and all of these were started on a schedule, and you're going to be getting that schedule today. It's looking at our last frost date, and it's telling you when you should be starting them inside if you're going to start them. Some of these you'll be putting directly in the ground. So again, it will tell you 2 weeks before frost, your last frost, or after your last frost. It will tell you on the seed package typically when it can go. So this, for example, is a little tiny flower called alyssum. It's fantastic for attracting the good bugs to the garden. Average soil, full sun to part shade after danger of heavy frost. So by the end of the month, I'll be able to put this straight in the garden. I won't need to put it in a seed tray. So you just want to, again, read what it says. So this one says direct sow or transplant after all danger of frost has passed. So again, if we get tricked like we did last year and you get a late frost, you're going to be the crazy lady running around putting out old bed sheets or double thick trash bags, because otherwise you're going to lose them. What's cool though is when you pull those trash bags back, there's heat that's built up underneath there, so it does work. So what I love about galvanized trays is it makes it really easy to water. And if I overwater, no big deal. The water's not going to get all over the counter. I'm not getting soil in the sink, so my husband appreciates that. But it's time to water these. I mean, you felt how lightweight these were. So we're going to water the tray, and it's going to suck up the water from the bottom.
So that's how you always water?
Seedlings, I recommend you do. Because the problem is if you water from the top, it's possible if it hasn't established any roots, you'll wash the seed out.
I think that's what I do all the time.
Yeah. So,
And that's much easier.
yeah. So you just water the tray, and then you can let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes, and if there's extra water, you just dump it out. No big deal. So that's it. You know, it's really super simple. Your seedlings are going to need 16 hours of light per day. So it's really great if you are using artificial light, if you can have it on a timer and then you don't have to worry about it. The other thing that I do that is to prevent what's called dampening off, which is basically it molds or grows algae, is I use just a little portable fan. I got this at Walmart for $8. And our goal here is not necessarily to blow it at the stem. Our goal is to kind of blow it just above the plant. And what it's doing is just moving the air around the seedling enough that it's keeping that mold from growing. But in addition, it's providing sort of like what it will experience outside. It's providing a little bit of wind, and it makes the stem stronger. So when it goes out.
For the 16 hours that you have the water?
Yep, so I just leave it on. Yep, and then again, so if you have it on a timer, you can cut them both off at the same time. Yep. So that's it. So that's all you're gonna need is heat